You guys do an incredible job. And one of your most recent stories that really, I think, that really pissed off a lot of people was the incident on October 7th in Israel, which was the Al-Aqsa flood led by Hamas. And it was widely reported, and still is widely reported in the Western press, as a brutal genocidal act of terrorism that was led by the Al-Qaeda's forces into Israel, in which they massacred civilians, they burned down entire homes, and they, burned people alive, even though these Hamas fighters only came in with, from what I understand, rifles and small grenade launchers. So if you could talk a little bit about that report you did at the Gray Zone and some of the major lies that were debunked in it.
Yeah, well, Bassem Naim, who's a former Hamas official, I think he headed the health ministry. He was one of the two figures that you might have seen in the Hamas press conference outlining their demands and the motivations behind Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th. He himself has just called for an international investigation into October 7th. So why would a Hamas official do that if they're accused of so many insane atrocities, from beheading babies to cutting the fetuses out of women to raping women to burning entire families alive? Why would he call for an investigation? He said, we don't even know what happened on October 7th. It's because he knows that Israel not only lied in order to give itself space to carry out some of the worst atrocities civilization has ever seen in the Gaza Strip, to give itself political space, especially in Washington, but also that Israel may have killed many of its own citizens on October 7th using the same tactics with the indiscriminate use of heavy weapons that we see in Gaza right now on its own territory, when it was caught completely flat-footed in one of the biggest intelligence failures the biggest intelligence failure in Israeli history. So what I think happened, what's becoming increasingly clear, is that Israel scrambled its military and security forces, including tanks and Apache helicopters, in order to try to dislodge this onslaught of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad militants. And they wound up getting orders, this has been reported in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, to actually shell homes with Israeli citizens inside them. And it's just so obvious if you look at one of the main sites of fighting where Hamas fighters had taken captives. This is Kibbutz Be'eri, which happens to be like all these kibbutzim in southern Israel, which are right on the periphery of Gaza. It's called the Gaza envelope. All these kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope are right next to military bases. So by Israeli logic, their citizens are human shields. But if you look at it now, the homes have been completely destroyed. They look burned and charred, and the exterior shells of these homes have crumbled. The roofs have been blown off. The inside is completely charred. Who could have done that in Hamas? They came in, you can just look at the videos. They came in with Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades. That can't do that kind of damage to all of these houses on such a comprehensive scale. Then you have Israeli reporters going in there from I-24, this state propaganda station funded by the Israeli Foreign Ministry, saying there are tank tracks everywhere. And you have testimony by people like Yasmin Porat, who was actually taken captive, but her captor gave himself up, that many, many Israelis were killed, in her words, in the crossfire, undoubtedly by our own forces, and that 2 tank shells were sent into her home. So we have eyewitness testimony on tanks shelling the homes. And then we have the security coordinator of the kibbutz stating in Haaretz that the order was given on a hotline that he participated in with the military to shell homes on their own occupants, even if Israelis were inside. I mean, they're just saying it openly. Then you have all these pictures that the Israeli Foreign Ministry and its, UN, its completely unhinged UN Ambassador Gilad Erdan are waving around, of people who look like they've been barbecued, are having reported in the Gaza Strip. I've seen cars that were hit by Hellfire missiles, that were hit by drones. And, even after the bodies were removed and the bodies looked like they were barbecued, you would see pieces of like a sandal melted into the gas pedal, and the car itself looked kind of melted. That's the way all these cars looked that were leaving the Nova Music Festival, this electronic music festival, to Gaza, or coming in from Gaza, but leaving to Gaza. They were hit by Apache helicopters. This is just an open fact that has been acknowledged by Apache helicopter pilots, reservists who were scrambled on October 7th and arrived basically around noon. They said we weren't in full force in the air with our 2 squadrons until noon. And they were opening fire on anything that moved on the ground. They said we had no intelligence, no way of determining what was Hamas and what was Israeli. But they were definitely shooting cars that were going back into the Gaza Strip because they thought they contained captives, or that they thought they were fleeing Hamas fighters. And something that was indicated or explained by one of these outlets that interviewed Apache helicopter pilots, Mako, was that by 10:30 a.m., all of the elite Hamas commando teams and Palestinian Islamic Jihad commando teams had already left. So by that point, people were flowing in from Gaza who had nothing to do with these 2 armed or political or military or political factions. Maybe they were low-level activists in the factions. A lot of them were just common people coming in from Gaza to take pictures because the border fence was open, and their cars were getting shelled. But there were shells, sorry, not shelled, but rocketed, hit with Hellfire missiles. And there were cars definitely containing captives, Israeli captives, that were hit by these missiles as well. And then so you just have you have Israeli officials holding up pictures of people in their cars that look barbecued. Some of them could have just been people from Gaza, but they're presenting them as Israelis and claiming that Hamas just burned people alive in their cars. And that's just absurd. So there does need to be an international investigation. Even an independent Israeli investigation will show that many, many Israelis were killed by Israel on October 7th, and then Israel has gone and presented their deaths as proof of the barbarism of Hamas. And I'm not saying that members of the Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, or Saraya al-Quds, the armed wing of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, did not shoot non-combatants. There's video showing that they did. But it's the more grotesque and lurid claims that Israel's put forward that need deeper investigation, because it looks like these charred bodies of families whose hands were tied under the rubble. This was the result of Israeli shelling and missile fire.
Yeah, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. You know, after the hype of it all had kind of calmed down, I was like, so I saw the videos of these guys coming in on the paragliders, and I know they don't have an air force. Well, who leveled these entire homes? Who managed to burn these cars into molten metal? It was very graphic and sad, but the saddest and worst part of all is now that Israel is using these images, as you said, and these stories, which a lot of them seem made up, 40 beheaded babies and whatnot, the raping of women and children. They have no proof. They're just putting it out there to justify the genocide against Gaza right now. So,
yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but where do these stories come from? Has any journalist in the U.S., like mainstream journalists, bothered to investigate? We've looked into them. I've looked into them, and they originate just from, in most cases, religious nationalist members of Israeli rescue teams or first responder teams who just simply spun these stories out and are now going around the U.S. raising money